As well as being the author of many world best-selling books, he's also the author of Emotional Intelligence that he wrote back in 1995. Emotional intelligence has touched the lives of millions around the world. And in fact, Harvard Business Review say that emotional intelligence is a revolutionary, paradigm-shattering idea. Since then, he has written many new books, including the two most recent ones, which is The Brain and Emotional Intelligence, New Insights, and also a book called Leadership, The Power of Emotional Intelligence. And we are absolutely delighted and honored to have Daniel Goleman here with us today. So Daniel, welcome.
Well, I'm always pleased to be back at Leaders Inn.
Daniel, we normally start with a quick fire round,
Sure.
just a sort of a warm-up, if you like.
Okay.
So I know you've been asked this many times, Daniel, since 1995, about a definition of emotional intelligence. But for the people that haven't seen it, can you do that in 60 seconds?
Emotional intelligence is being intelligent about emotions. So it's managing ourselves, being self-aware, managing emotions. It's handling our relationships well. That's it.
And what would you say is the most common question you get asked about emotional intelligence? And can you answer that for us?
Sure. Probably the most common question is, what can I do to boost my emotional intelligence?
Great.
To increase it?
Yeah. And what would be the sort of the quick fire answer to that?
It's not easy, but it's doable. It's learnable.
It's learnable.
Yes.
Okay. If there was one piece of advice you'd give on go out there and master one thing to improve your emotional intelligence, what would that be?
Be more mindful. Pay more attention to your own inner world and pay more attention to other people.
Excellent. Daniel, is there anyone that sort of personifies emotional intelligence that you think is really good out there in the world at the moment?
I think my favorite is the Dalai Lama.
Why do you think he personifies it so well?
Well, you know, he actually cares about people, and he is, he's actually, I just saw some survey data, he is the single most popular figure in the world. He's the most popular world leader, but he's nonpartisan. He's there on behalf of everybody, and I think that's fantastic.
One thing that you're most proud of, Daniel, so far in your career to date?
I think it's that the emotional intelligence curriculum has been picked up for schools, kindergarten through to university. That really, I think, in the long run, is my biggest accomplishment, helping that along.
Yeah. So worldwide now, people are talking about emotional intelligence, which I knew was a dream of yours back in 1995, and now schools are going to be talking about it as well. That's pretty cool. One of the things I saw, Daniel, when I was reading about that is that they use a traffic light system whenever a kid's getting into a bad mood, red, and that sort of sunk in with me. Maybe that
Well,
means
it's
I'm
not
a
a traffic light. It's one of the model programs that I've looked at quite a bit, which is in a inner city, poverty-stricken neighborhood, high crime, drug dealing, and so on. The kids there in every classroom see a stoplight, red light, yellow light, green light. It says, when you're getting upset, remember the stoplight, stop, calm down, and think before you act. That's really good advice. Yellow light, think of a range of things you might do. And then green light, pick the best one and try it out. And it's very effective for kids. Yeah. And that's a basic lesson in emotional intelligence.
Yeah, excellent. It's good for a 39-year-old like me as well. If we can start now with a topical question,
Sure.
And that is, with all your collective wisdom around leadership and CEO skills and what makes people be successful, if we can talk about Steve Jobs. Obviously, back on October 6th this year, we lost Steve Jobs. And people like Barack Obama said the world has lost a visionary. So can we ask you, what is it you think that made Steve Jobs such a great CEO and even icon?
Well, he was a leader. He wasn't a manager. In fact, he wasn't very good at managing. He knew that. But he was fantastic at inspiring people and motivating them and setting a direction. Not only a direction, a visionary direction. What was remarkable about Steve Jobs is that he pushed the boundaries. He didn't take things as a given. He looked at the system and reinvented it. So we got the iPod, we got the iPhone, we got the iPad, and ITV is next. And that takes great vision. So he had all of the elements of someone who can change things permanently. He was able to see what other people couldn't. He was able to understand how to get there, and he was able to move people to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, his products are world famous, and how do you think he's been able to get such a cult following, both internally and also externally? Do you think he had a great emotional intelligence?
I think, like everyone else, he was a mixed picture.
Yeah.
And I think he was, some people found him not so emotionally intelligent, and some people saw that he was superb. And by the way, emotional intelligence is not one thing. It's a spectrum of abilities, from self-awareness to managing yourself, to empathy, to relationship management. And within each of those domains, there's several abilities. So Steve Jobs was fantastic at inspiring leadership. He was fantastic in his ability to vision and to share that vision. He wasn't fantastic in every other way, but you don't need to be. That's the good news.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the attributes or characteristics of, putting Steve Jobs aside for a second, but just generally the top 1 or 2% of leaders, the sort of the star leaders, if you like?
Well, I was just going over some data about that with my associates at the Hay Group, and what we've been finding is that leaders who are able to exhibit a high level of competence, like the drive to achieve, or emotional self-awareness, or empathy, or relationship building, who are able to excel at half a dozen or more of those emotional intelligence abilities, are also able to exhibit leadership styles that create a very positive organizational climate. That climate, in turn, predicts 30% of business results. So it starts with managing yourself, and then managing your relationship, and then exhibiting the abilities of leaders to set a vision, that is, a vision that moves people, to speak from the heart to the heart, who are also able to help other people get better, coach them, who are able to know when to get a consensus decision instead of just top down, who know that having a good time together isn't a waste of time. It builds relationship strength, so people will be there for each other. It's people like that who are able to create a climate that drives performance.
You mentioned there heart to heart, and you've got a whole section in your new book on primal leadership and the importance of emotion,
Yes.
and sort of tapping into people's emotions. So could you just tell me a little bit about what you mean when you say emotional leadership?
It's leading at the level of emotions, through emotions, and the best leaders do this naturally. So when you speak heart to heart, you're moving people, but there's sensing that you're moved yourself. It's genuine. And the medium through which leadership is executed is relational. It is emotional. And now we know the brain centers that are involved. There's a new discovery in neuroscience. It's called the social brain. It's circuitry we didn't even know existed 10 years ago. But it turns out that when we're face-to-face, when we're on the phone even, your brain and my brain are locked together, and there's an invisible channel that's passing emotions back and forth. And the best leaders help other people get and stay in the best emotional state to work at their best.
Right. So I assume then that they themselves, if the brains are locked to some extent, and this contagion occurs, then they themselves have got to be in relatively good moods most of the time.
Well, you've got to start by managing yourself. You have to lead yourself first.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So then let's just talk about that, because you have a great chapter in there talking about the correlation between good moods and bottom line, and those are direct correlations. So if a leader comes to work and they've read your books and they understand the contagion principle, then how do they get in a good mood if they are in a fundamentally bad mood?
Let's start with the data first.
Okay.
I think you're referring to a number of studies that show if the leader on a team or in a group is in an upbeat mood, people in that group catch that mood, and performance goes up. Decision-making gets better. Creativity improves. If the leader is in a downbeat mood, critical, angry, frustrated, people pick that up and performance goes down. So there's a direct relationship between leader's mood, group team's mood, and performance. Once you understand that, you see that a leader must start by leading by managing himself or herself first, because it's going to affect everybody else.
Yeah. Exactly. And you mentioned there about authentic leadership. You've got to, people will be able to tell the difference if you're trying to get to people's emotions, but you're just faking it.
Well, we have radar for that.
Yeah.
And it's built into the brain. And, if it doesn't ring true, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. Okay. Is there such a thing as a personality type that's just a grouch? And if that is the case, if they've got any chance in leadership?
There are types of grouches. Some grouches are lovable grouches,
True.
I mean, they seem tough on the outside, but they're soft on the inside, and people pick that up. Okay. There are some grouches who are actually hostile people, who criticize, who express contempt and disgust, which is very damaging in any relationship. But leader to follower, it's terrible because it alienates people. You're going to lose people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So can you just tap into self-mastery just a little bit and tell us about how you can, you mentioned self-regulation. Sorry to use your terms. I might not be having the right, but how you actually can manage yourself if you come to work and you're in a horrible mood and you know that it's very important that you're in that.
Well, first of all, notice that you're in a horrible mood. It takes what we call mindfulness, which is a variety of self-awareness. You have to tune into yourself. If you can easily go through the day in a horrible mood, alienating everybody else and upsetting them, and not even know. So step number 1, notice. Okay. Step number 2, pause. Reflect on this. Is this useful? Is it not useful? Step number 3, is there something I can do to change my mood?
Daniel, just out of interest, if you were observing a sort of a group of 10 peers, do you think just by observing them be able to identify the sort of the natural leader in that group of 10 people? And if so, what do you think are some of the attributes you'd look for? Yeah,
I think that they would be listening, observing, and noticing what the unspoken need of the group is and taking the first step toward that, fulfilling that need. That's how leaders emerge. They sense what needs to happen and they make it happen.
Yeah. You talk about group IQ there. If you can just define group IQ for us, because I haven't seen
the group IQ is very important. It's the sum total of the best talent of each person on a team contributed at full force. That is the group IQ. That summates in the group IQ. However, the best predictor of the performance of that team is not the potential group IQ, it's the harmony on the team. Right. In other words, how long can we get along with each other? Yeah. Can we work together? Do we cooperate well? That means that people are free to express their best talent at full force and will want to.
Yeah. You mentioned in group IQ as well about sort of harmony and also that the leaders are socially skillful. Presumably that doesn't mean that they're just the most sociable in the group.
Social skill doesn't necessarily look like sociability. It's paying attention, it's empathizing, it's sensing how people feel and knowing how to respond.
Okay. Empathy, let's pick up on that for a second. Daniel, in your first book you mentioned about empathy and how important that is, and obviously there's different types of empathy, but talking about the spectrum, if you've got on one level of the spectrum you've got the sociopath, and the other one you've got somebody that's just absolutely besotted by other people's feelings. Is it important to have a balance? Do you think you can be, obviously you can be too far towards the sociopath spectrum, but can you be too far that way?
Yeah, you see that in people, for example, in the helping professions, nurses, say, who are taking care of people who are suffering, who are in pain, who are angry, who pick up those emotions and can't metabolize them. They just it changes their internal state. Instead of them changing the patient's state, the patient's changing their state because of this, you could say, too empathic stance. What's missing there is self-management, self-regulation, as we say. That is to say, the people who are most effective don't tune out in order to protect themselves and turn off to other people. They stay open, but they're able to pass that through, to manage their own inner state at the same time they're being receptive. That's the best.
Okay, that's great. So you can be in an empathetic situation, but not allow it to be too heavily on your shoulders and to take it personally. Okay.
No, well, it's more than that. It's that you don't let it change your state. You stay stable in the positive state you need.
And therefore, you wouldn't be as stressed as you would be.
Yeah,
if you could be.
So it rolls off.
Yeah, Daniel, you've mentioned this correlation between a very interesting graph in your book talking about the inverse U-shape, which has got productivity and stress and the correlation. Could you just talk to us about what you call the sweet spot for achievement.
The sweet spot for achievement. So this you're referring to an inverted U, and this axis is performance.
Thank you.
How well you do, and the other axis goes from low brain arousal to high brain arousal. It's a very technical graph, but the sweet spot for performance is at the top of that U. And this is where people work at their best, think at their best. It's called, neurologists call it a state of neural harmony. It's a state of also maximal cognitive efficiency. That is, we can think at our best. We're most nimble, most flexible. In sports, it's called the zone. You know, athletes who are superb, when they're being at their best, are in that zone. And it's sometimes called flow. But if you are at work, or if you're doing something you really care about, anything, that's where you want to be. If you're managing people, if you're leading people, that's where you want everyone to be, because that's where you get the most return.
Yeah. And on the low side, you've just got bored.
Well, on the one hand, you have people who are completely disengaged, which unfortunately is too large a portion of the workforce on any given day at any given moment, which means, you know, I don't care about this job. I'll just do what I have to do to keep it. I'm not going to give my best. I'm just going to do enough to hold my position. And at the other end, you've got people who are overstressed. The technical term for that in neurology is a state of frazzle. Right. The brain is actually frazzled. You can't think straight. You can't remember. You can't learn. Forget creativity. It's and so disengagement and frazzle are equally bad for performance. You want people to be in the middle in the sweet spot.
I can't remember the last time I was bored. I'm definitely on the frazzle side. Definitely on the frazzle. Okay, so Daniel, if you mentioned stress, and you've got I think it's an audio CD out there, which is Stress and 6 Ways to Master Relaxation. Can you just, for me and for anyone else out there that gets in a stress state, give us some insights as to how we can manage?
Well, I did this audio instruction on 6 ways to manage stress. It goes back to some research I did years ago at Harvard, which showed that people really differ in what works for them as a relaxation modality. One thing doesn't work for everybody. And so one way to relax, if you want a method, and I recommend that people have a method. The reason is this. What you're doing is training your brain to relax even under pressure. That's the hard. You don't want to learn this under pressure. You want to practice at home when things are quiet and calm, and you can try out a method and do it daily, because you're going to need that method in the heat of the day, during your frazzle or approaching frazzle moments. And if you haven't practiced, your brain won't be able to do it. So one of the methods, for example, is very simple. It's simply paying attention to your breath and letting go of other thoughts. Turns out that that's very effective for many people as a way to both lower your metabolic state, which is to say to get more relaxed, and to focus, to develop more concentration. One of the big problems today is staying concentrated amidst all of the distractions. But for other people, for example, a deep muscle relaxation will work better. That's why there are 6 different methods.
Okay, got it. So we're just going to get the CD. But I've read, actually do it first thing in the morning to get yourself in a...
Yeah, I like to do a meditation first thing in the morning. I'm a writer, so I'll have breakfast, and I'll have a meditation session, and then I'll do writing, because I'm in a very focused state.
Related to this, a sort of sister topic is motivation, or makes somebody motivated. And if they're constantly stressed, they're not going to be in a motivated state. And some leaders obviously have people that are low skill and demotivated, and they should probably get moved on. But you've also got other highly talented people that are demotivated. So if a leader sees that in a member of their team, what advice would you give?
Well, you know, I would start with, what does this person really want? I'd have a one-on-one conversation, What do you want from your life? What do you want from your career? What do you want from this job? What is it about this job that might be exciting or engaging? How could I, as a manager, help this person have assignments, for example, that will help them develop skills for where they want to go in life? In other words, you engage, but you start by seeing what's meaningful for the person.
Okay, and it goes back to something else you were saying about heart to heart, having a heart heart conversation and tapping into their emotion.
And by the way, this conversation is not about the job; it's about the person.
Yeah.
So it is very much heart to heart.
Yeah, exactly. And making sure what they're doing now is aligning with their
where they want to go,
emotion.
or how can you move things a bit so that it's closer to where they want to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, in your chapter on managing, actually it's called Managing with the Heart, you've got a whole section there dedicated to giving feedback the right way, and presumably because you can really demoralize and destroy people if you do it incorrectly. So Daniel Goleman's 1 minute on the right way of giving feedback.
The worst way to give feedback is when you are flipping out and angry at the person, and you just blast the person. That's ruinous. Yeah. It ruins your relationship, for one thing. They won't want to have much to do with you after that, and it doesn't get you what you want, which is for them to improve. So it's better if you start by saying something positive, something that they did well. Then also you can say what they didn't do so well, what specifically they didn't do so well, why that wasn't so good in terms of either where they want to go or where we all are shared mission, and then what they could do to improve next time.
Great. And
how they might learn to strengthen a skill so that they will do better next time.
Great. Yeah.
And even maybe how you can help them next time.
Great.
If appropriate.
Yeah. Daniel, you alluded to a little bit earlier about the fact that we can get so distracted by we're in a social media world, and you've got I'm really looking forward to talking to you about sort of the social online mind as well. But for now, there's so much distraction, whether it's an Outlook pop-up or a Facebook notification or something. That's got to be killing some people's time management out there, isn't it?
I think one of the most insidious realities of work today is how technology is destroying our ability to focus and get things done. Yeah. Because every time there's a distractor, every time you get an email and you feel I have to answer that right now, instead of putting it aside and finishing your task, it's going to take a long time. Some studies have shown up to 15 minutes to get back to where you were before in terms of focus, and if, and life is, your BlackBerry and your email and your texts, and it doesn't stop. That's the problem with technology, is it's too easy for people to reach us, which means we have too many distractors, and there's a paradox here, which is there's some brain systems that like to look, because you get a little hit of pleasure from some of these. It's what's called intermittent reinforcement. Every once in a while, an email is going to make you feel really good. Maybe this is one of those.
Interesting.
And so it's very seductive. That's what makes us break our train. But then once we've done it, we've lost our train of thought, we've lost our concentration, and so on. So, for example, when I write, I go somewhere where I don't get email, where there's no phone even. I'm off-grid. Because I want to focus. And there's some really good research coming out of Harvard that shows that people whose job is to somehow add value, to be creative or to produce, need a cocoon of time for sustained effort where they're going to get something done. And that if you get one thing done during the day, you're going to feel much better about your job, actually, than if you can get nothing done because you've been distracted all day.
Okay, that's really good. So whoever's watching this, it's about identifying the most important things. So for you, it's probably writing. I mean, you're one of the most sought-after speakers in the world, so you could get bombarded by emails, telephone calls constantly, but dividing and separating the most important time out in the day is essential.
Well, I structure my day so I have protected time, and I really recommend that. And I recommend it for managers, for people who are in a leadership position, who are managing knowledge workers, people whose job is to add value by thinking, by being smart, by being innovative, by being original. They need time where they can get that done in the day.
Yeah, we interviewed Edward de Bono, and he's obviously a great thinker, and he says that not enough corporations or leaders are actually thinking, and it's one of the cheapest, most efficient ways of beating the competition, but nobody's doing it, which is linked to what you're talking about as carving time out for that.
Exactly.
Daniel, can we talk about the aha moment, which you talk about? I mean, we're in as you said, we're in the knowledge world. The currency out there is potentially ideas. So how can we manufacture that a sort of aha moment where we can come up with sort of potentially
Well,
innovative ideas?
you know, the aha moment is very paradoxical. You can't manufacture it. It happens of its own. But you can allow for it. You can create the circumstances where it's more likely. So, for example, if you're facing a creative problem and you know, we're rebranding and we have to come up with a new logo, something like that, whatever it may be, first you pursue it as diligently and as broadly as you can. Gather whatever information you might need. Really fill your brain with that.
Okay.
But then the next step is really paradoxical. Then you let it go. And the reason you let it go is that when you're very focused on, okay, what's our logo going to be, on whatever the problem is, you've activated the left half of the brain, which is task-oriented. And there's two things about the left hemisphere. One is that it excludes other things to focus on the task at hand, the focus at hand. The other is that it doesn't have many connections to other parts of the brain as compared to the right hemisphere. When you let go, you turn the problem over to the right hemisphere. Right hemisphere daydreams, it's a source of creativity, and it also has very far-flung connections throughout the brain. And the innovative aha arises when original connections are made. And they're more likely to happen during that reverie state, you know, in the shower, while you're walking the dog, doing yoga, rather than when you're sweating trying to solve the problem. And so the aha occurs when you let yourself go into a reverie after having pursued the problem.
Excellent. Because I can see a lot of people now going for long walks and saying to their boss they're waiting for the aha moment.
Well,
but it is in that relaxed.
but you can't make it happen, but it's more likely to. You can't. Don't promise your boss ever.
Yeah. One innovative sort of disruptive idea per walk. That'd be quite good, wouldn't it? That's a lot of pressure. But talking about pressure, can you put yourself under pressure to come up with an idea by 3:30 this afternoon? I mean, does that?
Well, of course you can, but it just may not be your best idea.
Okay, got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take a weekend for that.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody's out there in the sort of in the world has decisions to be made, and whether you're managing yourself or whether you're a subordinate, just managing your own diary, you're still making decisions all the way through to VC guys or CEOs making massive multi-billion-pound decisions. So, do you have any advice on? I mean, you're in your book, The Brain, Emotional Intelligence, and New Insights. You talk about the neocortex and the subcortex. No matter how big the idea be, should you be making the decision with the gut? What's your Daniel Goleman's advice?
My advice is both and, actually. Some interesting data on that. There was a study done of California entrepreneurs who built businesses from nothing to huge amounts. And they're asked, how do you make your decisions? And they all said essentially the same thing. They were voracious gatherers of data. They had very broad nets. They didn't, things that other people wouldn't think might be relevant. They delve into the numbers. They look at everything. And then they would check it against their gut feeling. And what that means is that the first swipe is cortical, the part of the brain that thinks in words and numbers. And then you check that against your gut feeling. And the reason is this. The reason that's a good idea. There's a primitive part of the brain. It's actually in the brainstem that as we go through life, gathers decision roles. When I did that, that worked well. When I said that, that really didn't work. And as we face a decision point, it summates your life experience relevant to the topic, and it sends you a message. The problem is it has no connection to the part of the brain that thinks in words. It sends the message to the gut, the GI tract. So when you say trust your gut, actually that's literally true, because you get a felt sense. Feels right, doesn't feel right. And all these entrepreneurs said, I'd check it against that. Even if the numbers look good, if it didn't feel right, I wouldn't go ahead.
That's amazing, yeah. Reading a book, that's one thing that jumped out. Have feelings about your thoughts.
Well, feelings about our thoughts are absolutely essential. If we had no feelings about our thoughts, we wouldn't know our priorities.
Yeah. And equally, you can't just go around just operating on your feelings alone. You've got to...
No, feelings and thoughts.
Yeah. Daniel, we've talked a lot about leadership, and last time we interviewed you, Barack Obama hadn't quite made it to the White House, but he was doing pretty well in the polls. Now he's been in office. Is there any thoughts that the great Daniel Goleman has on Barack?
Well, you know, there's the Barack Obama we elected, there's the Barack Obama we got, and there's the Barack Obama we wished we had. And there are three different leadership styles. The one that we elected was a visionary leader, very moving, very inspiring, speaking from the heart to the heart in a way that actually moved people by the millions to vote for him. Beautiful vision. The one we got was a leader who relied on a consensus style when it was just ineffective. He kept pretending that the opposition wanted to work with him, and they didn't. And he got disappointingly far, so few results. And then there's the one that we wish we had, who would have taken control more and been more commanding during real emergencies. And that's the one I think that would have gotten some results.
Okay. So your 6 attributes of leadership, maybe he could have swung to some of those other ones.
Well, if he had exhibited more leadership styles at the right time in the right way, I think he would have had a more effective presidency.
Okay.
I mean, it's not over, but we'll see.
Good. So page 37 to 58 of your book, that was Barack Obama, obviously, and whoever's out there in the world at the moment who wants to get elected for anything, pretty much, has got to have some form of online polling. But one of the things I've noticed is that sort of you've got a section called the social brain online, and people have ability to shoot off emails they don't necessarily mean, or some of the. It's most notable if you go to YouTube and you watch some of the comments that people have made on people. They wouldn't say that to their face, I'm sure.
Exactly.
So why is that, and where do you think it's
going?
going?
Well, here's the problem. Our brains are designed for face-to-face interaction. And the social brain, when we're interacting with someone, is constantly managing us, telling us, okay, you can say that, don't say that, now you should do this. Online, there is no channel for the social brain. We sit and type an email, and our brain assumes that all of the nonverbal signifiers of how we really feel, contextual cues, emotions, are going to go along with the message, but actually only the words go. So it turns out there's a negativity bias to email. If you ask the sender, was that pretty positive, that email you just sent? And they say yes. And then you ask the receiver tends to say, no, it was pretty neutral. If the sender says that was a neutral email, the receiver is likely to think it was pretty negative. So we have to be more empathic. We have to think before we send an email, how is this going to be received? How can I, get across the emotions? Emoticons are not quite enough. You really need to think about the words. There's another problem online, and that is that face-to-face, there's a neural system that inhibits the amygdala, the part of the brain that's very rash, very impulsive, gets angry, wants to hit. That's very childlike, and that inhibitory system is nullified completely online because there's no feedback for it. So we have what's called a disinhibitory effect, where the rashest, most childlike part of us online is freed to say that thing, send that email when we're really worked up that we're going to regret later.
Right.
So I always think that it's much better if you can, have a Skype call maybe, or a video conference, or at least see the other person, or even a telephone call. A lot of emotional messages are sent by voice. But when we're almost piloting blind emotionally when we're just online.
Got you. Okay, and that's the reason if you go to some user-generated content of people talking about even brands, they could actually be exaggerating almost the experience they have.
Yeah, they're disinhibited. Yeah. So as you alluded to, people will say things online that they would never say face-to-face.
Right. That's the reason why it's good to get sort of face-to-face exposure with the people you're talking to online as well, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Well, there are a lot of business implications for this because more and more people work in virtual teams. And there's some good research that suggests that if team members don't know each other, things will not work as well online if they only collaborate online. So it's important that people have face time, but not just face time, downtime face to face, to get to know each other, because that nullifies the negativity effect.
Got you.
If you know the person and say, oh, well, that's Frank, he's like that.
Yeah. I know a lot of Franks. We all know that sort of, you create your habits and then your habits create you and they define you. So how would you go about hardwiring a more healthy or positive habit? And is it possible to replace habits that may be hardwired into you from a...
Well, this is really the basis of improving leadership abilities, is changing habits, because one of the common colds of leadership is not listening.
Right.
Just saying what you think. Someone comes into the office, they start to speak. It's like when you go to a physician. And you start to say, well, doctor, I'm having this and this and this, and you have like 3 things you want to talk about. Well, in 18 seconds, they'll take over the conversation, steer it where they want to go, and you're out the door.
Yeah.
And you asked like 1/2 of a question. And it's the same with bosses. It's the same with leaders. So how would you get over that bad habit?
Yeah.
And the answer is there are simple steps. First is notice it. Realize, oh, I do have this habit, and it would be better for me as a leader if I could change. In other words, second step, care about it. If you don't care, you're not going to get anywhere. Third step, think, well, how could I intentionally counter that habit? I could have a contract with myself that when someone comes into my office, I'm going to stop, pause, listen to them, and then say what I think. It's that simple. But to do that, you have to overcome years and years of another habit. And then the fourth step is to practice at every naturally occurring opportunity. And if you do that, you'll reach a neural landmark where you do it well without having to think about it.
Got you, yeah. Because I love the bit in your book, Leadership, The Power of Emotional Intelligence, where you've just got a list of attributes of good bosses and bad bosses.
Oh, yes.
So you just choose the good ones and you build them into habits.
Well, yeah. And by the way, that list is universal. Everywhere I go in the world, I get pretty much the same list. Yeah. We all know what that bastard of a boss looks like.
Yeah, that's right, with a lot of nodding heads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Daniel, you also wrote a book called Ecological Intelligence. And so if you can just elaborate. I mean, you're a very smart guy. Nobody needs to be told that. You've got a journalistic brain as well. So what were some of the findings?
Well, I was really intrigued as a psychologist by the fact that although we're now in what's called the Anthropocene age, which is the first geological age, where the activities of one species are degrading the 8 global systems that sustain life. It's not just carbon and global warming, it's nitrogen, there are 8 systems. And the ordinary byproducts of the ways we get energy, transportation, construction, industry, and commerce, by the way, are destroying those systems. Right. Why don't we notice? Why don't we care? Why don't we have an alarm? And the problem is that our brain was shaped during a different geological era, when the dangers were snarling tigers. And our brain actually is designed in a way where we cannot perceive, nor do we care much about, spontaneously, the danger facing our species. I was just at a conference in India about the environment, where a scientist from Oxford was saying that it looks like within the next few decades, certainly within the next 50 years, what we think of as heat waves will be the normative temperature. And heat waves will be 5 degrees centigrade higher. And that's just the way the planet is going. There's going to be dead water in many, many parts of the world, meaning it won't sustain life. Life as we know it is going to change radically if we continue as we're going. And I'm not actually doom and gloom here, because I think business holds the key. I think that if, to the extent that retailers and people who have supply chains favor new ways of doing things that have better impacts, that lessen their footprint, to the extent we do this systematically, it will reward innovation and rethinking. We have to reinvent everything. Yeah. Because our industrial platforms, processes, and chemicals were developed in a day before we had a metric for these ecological impacts. Now that we have it, we have a lens we can evaluate. And what we measure, we can manage. So as we measure the toxic chemicals that are byproducts of the way we make things now, or the particulates emissions, any of those things, we can then have a way of comparing suppliers. Look at your supply chain, and where can you get something better? To the extent that we all look for improvements in the supply chain, and that retailers look for products that are better, we're going to drive enormous innovation. I think actually the next 50 years we'll see a period of fantastic reward for entrepreneurial, innovative solutions.
Yeah, exactly. And do you think it's going to get into the mind of consumers that they would want to choose an ecologically friendly manufacturer?
Well, it's interesting. Today's consumers, only about 10% care passionately. 30% couldn't care less. However, if you look at children who are growing up with a steady drumbeat of dire warnings about what will happen within their lifespan, you're going to see a very different consumer. And forward-looking companies see this now. Some of the biggest companies in the world are planning for the next generation consumer. So they're trying to get ahead of this.
Daniel, all the way from leadership to what we've just been talking about, ecological intelligence, I just wanted to say it's been an absolute honor again to have you here, Daniel. Thank you very much. On behalf of our viewers and me, thank you, sir.
Anthony, always a pleasure.
Thank you.